When we think about power, we often think about physical power, manipulating our physical world, or even trying to control others, sometimes even using force. But there's another kind of power that always benefits and is never violent, never forceful, a very soft power, the power of the soul, the power of peace, of silence, of purity, the power of good wishes. It's a very subtle, quiet, essence-full power, completely invisible. And yet its impact and reach is profound. It is a power that empowers others. And it starts deep within the cell. The seed of such power is awareness. To go into a quiet place inside, put aside all other thoughts and concerns, and come right to the point, the essence of the sound. I, the thinker, the observer, the experiencer, I, the soul, a being of profound peace, when I go deep into this experience, feel it with the entire being. It creates a vibration, a healing, soothing, nourishing vibration that can reach the other side of the world. A vibration that supports souls in letting go of what damages the heart and taking hold of what heals. A very non-intrusive power that gently supports true power. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, and welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And so, our topic tonight is the power of silence. Make a change. And so, perhaps maybe actually, I'll start with what pulled you to this topic.
Very simple. We had a lesson recently on how the power of silence really is the foundation of all the other powers, as well as the power of silence makes the impossible possible. And I found that really intriguing.
So, perhaps maybe it's interesting because I was in a planning team today and we were talking about the power of silence. And that everyone seems to have different learned experiences of what silence is, and for it to actually be something that one loves. And what has your experience been like? Your journey when you started learning about silence, was that your fortune? It was something that was a lovely experience to begin with. Was it a journey of learning? I'm sure it varies from one soul to another.
I think more than anything else, which is why the slogan appealed, is because it always felt that silence was happening in a more integrated way. So I was experiencing it while in action. And so it was very practical and very enjoyable in the sense of complementing or supporting or anchoring, if you will. So it wasn't perhaps the conventional or traditional or expected concept of silence, which tends to be very, very separated. It was, I'm thinking of different situations in athletics or dance where it seemed that that was really an important part of being able to unlock capacity.
So, do you feel then that when you were saying it was more practical, you mean when you started Raja Yoga or when you were just before that, even when you were dancing?
Yeah, I would say before that, one of these memories that come to my mind is actually when I was involved in athletics and track and field. And we were always taught, as a sprinter on the starting block, to keep the body moving because it has to stay warm, and you're about to do very explosive movements. So we're always, if you look, it looks quite active and agitated as runners are preparing. And I always would find myself wanting to be very still and quiet. So I looked a little bit odd, really introverted, pulled within, and that seemed to complement the gathering of energy for the activity. So, and of course, with dance, it's such a mindful, introverted, have to pay so much attention to what's going on subtle levels. Again, silence seemed very important in being able to do that.
Would you say you were using those words at the time? So that the reason why I'm asking is not about the words themselves, but when souls hear the word silence, they may have different experiences of what that means.
I definitely think so. And I wouldn't say I would use the word silence at that time. It's only in retrospect. But I think it was probably a little bit more of a hit and miss. So coming into the spiritual study, we're given a methodology, exactly what silence is, how to access it, and the power of integrating it. So it's far more methodical, less hit and miss coming into the study.
think a part of the reason why I asked that question, I was wondering if souls who are tuning in can relate to that. Find to not maybe cross off that they have negative experiences of silence or a negative relationship with silence, but maybe in different contexts in their lives that they have actually had a meaningful experience of it, but they just don't call it silence. Because for myself, I found it challenging trying to write. If I was asked to write a piece of something, and I would have to actually just free write for a while, and until there was a bit more clarity inside, or if I used to, wasn't particularly because of being in nature, but just being in solitude. I really enjoyed having that quiet time too. But I guess until you start mentioning about your experiences of what it was prior to being in the study, I may not have necessarily identified that myself because of these other ideas we may have about silence when we're actually studying Raja Yoga and maybe making it quite inaccessible or rather artificial for ourselves, maybe even a bit more contrived.
I think definitely one thing that we are um, made aware of in this study is that for very long we've been going at things from even spiritual things from a physical approach. So definitely that includes silence, a very physical, and that can be very oppressive. And the physical silence. Today I was asked the question, how do you maintain this inner peace or silence while you're in noisy, active environments? And to me, it's never felt that those two are mutually exclusive. But if we have a physical concept of things, and yes, they don't seem to go together. But once we go into a spiritual understanding of silence, and that completely changes. So we're always trying to check, am I still operating from, when we say the past, we were operating from such a physical place. Whereas, of course, we now know that for healthy activity, there has to be silence integrated. Silence is a sign that I am present as a spiritual being.
Thank you for asking Check and Change. We are well, and we hope you are as well. So, was reflecting on this aspect of silence. I've heard sometimes some students mention that there was actually one recent conversation that is silence fully, completely only an internal thing, or is it a balance of inside and outside? He has been in silence retreats, perhaps maybe at the center, and not necessarily everyone, or maybe just on his own personal progress or as observed. And not speaking at all can actually create a bit of waste and maybe a bit of a wall between one and others. How to have that balance.
I know that in terms of physical development, if I'm trying to master an exercise in the face of previous habits, and that's really important. So let's say I have a way of aligning the body that isn't very healthy, but it's a deep habit. When you're dealing with deep habits being in existence, you sort of have to put oneself in an artificial or zero gravity environment, physically speaking, to have a chance of overriding those habits initially. And I sometimes think that way about our mastering of silence, that sometimes we might need to be in a physically, zero gravity situation. So I can see why souls might seek out physically silent environments just to get a handle in the face, because we have certain habits. So, for example, we have that joke about the hip flexors that every time I do the exercise, the wrong muscle fires. So I need to put myself in another situation, a zero gravity, so I can get the other muscle firing. Once I've mastered it, I can go out of the zero gravity situation and that other muscle will, the appropriate muscle will fire. So I can see why we might choose, fashion a certain environment. Just it's only because there's previous habits. If they weren't there, we wouldn't have to do it. But ideally, the vision, the objective again, is to integrate it back in. So true silence is very light and joyful. It wouldn't ever be experienced as cold or rejecting if it's the real deal. It's very embracing. And the other thing that happens once I start to experiment with silence is that I start to realize what is necessary and what is not. So, someone who is experimenting with silence probably is going to be more essenceful and efficient. Absolutely. We've got a lot of wasted words and activity and thoughts going on, and that becomes clear in silence. So, yes, they might appear to be speaking less or doing less, but that's more a result of coming back into a healthy state.
I guess two questions. One of them is, could it also be being sort of fashioning a certain context of silence, creating that optimal space? Can also even maybe have the opposite effect if someone has had experiences of silence that's just very, very isolating. And I'll just let you answer the first question before I go to the second.
I suppose it's just really important to see what's driving the experience at the foundation. Because yes, I could be in a noisy environment and I have the foundation right. So I'm able to reach a very enjoyable, or we call it sweet silence, or I can be in a completely physically silent environment, but it's coming from the wrong foundation. So I find it a very disturbing. I can't wait to come out of it, right? Which happens a lot. We find that souls even say, yeah, no, I enjoyed it, but they still that feeling of they can't wait to come into sound. So I have to check is, what what space am I operating from? Is it spiritual? So that it's a healthy form of silence. It could go either way in terms of the externals, but it's really more the internal, the foundation.
Thank you. The second question is about this enjoyable silence you're mentioning. It should feel light, should feel fulfilling, not heavy. In terms of your saying that if one was really in that space, they would really be pulled to speak less. They would be pulled. There'd probably be some changes in the choices they make. How about in terms of uh, sort of having supportive mechanisms, meaning that maybe I should at least maybe take care of being more selective of what I speak about to help to get me into silence? Is there any merit in that?
I suppose there is, but for that to be sustainable and honest, I will again have to go back to the foundation. Ideally, when we say foundation, of course, the foundation of spirituality is the experience. I am spirit. So, in that state of soul consciousness, things happen very naturally. And I've heard many conversations about working from the inside out and the outside in. And I don't think there's a problem working for the outside in. If I'm again aware that's what I'm doing, and it will only be sustainable until I actually get that strong foundation. Otherwise, it's going to start to feel like a bunch of rules being imposed on me. So, yes, if it helps me to get the foundation, absolutely. But if it's just about creating a context or an outer environment, and I don't actually ever get to the foundation, then I don't know if it will be sustainable.
We had a similar conversation today, actually. And perhaps maybe I don't know, is it different for experienced students where they have experienced silence, and then so now let's say they decide they want to have a program. And then, well, it would help if I simplify things in my life because the conversation sort of went two ways where one group was like, you would simplify your life if you is a sign and indication that you are actually in that experience of silence. Where the other group was they've had beautiful experiences of silence, but now that we have a dedicated program we want to have, we're also going to try to find ways to simplify things. Does that make sense? Like they love the experience of it, and because of what they love, they have chosen to want to simplify things.
I suppose either approach or either one again, driving it could work. But for myself, and I'm only saying this because I've seen the same thing happen in movement. Um, at the end of the day, for this to be sustainable and something I can integrate, I ideally would like that simplicity to be driven from within. Um, but yes, they might have had silence, notice that simplicity, and so associate the two. Let's do that to try and generate that experience, awaken that capacity we know is in there. So absolutely. But there's always that small possibility. It's a bit like someone saying, I was having a wonderful experience and that song was playing, and then they're like, I've got to play that song because they've connected it with that wonderful experience. What happens when they don't have that song is the question. So we just have to be cautious that this is something that can become, as we say, unlimited or unconditional or independent and is really driven from. So now from that place of silence within or spirituality within, I'm going to create a simplifying atmosphere. And I think the most powerful, if we're saying power of silence, is when that foundation from within simplifies my own mind, which is the most important place we want simplicity, and actually creates a vibe where others find themselves being pulled in simplicity, then I think something powerful is happening.
So this aspect of power of silence, I know you're saying that it was you're sharing what pulled you to this, but just in terms of just let's share a little bit about the power of silence. What your experience has been like, and we do have this beautiful image hanging in the main floor, and it's this beautiful swan, and there's all these different thoughts in terms of silence, which I'm guessing is based on your experimentations of it. But what has been your experience of silence, especially for souls to at least maybe feel that this is a very good thing to develop within?
First off, I can take absolutely zero credit for the writings on that poster. Um, but when we talk about anything being a power, it always feels like a couple of things for me. It means that I'm able to express or experience that in less than ideal conditions. So, in other words, it's unconditional. I can do this in any situation. That's one feeling for power. But the other is that it's has a transformative effect. So, yes, I can be peaceful in a peaceful environment. But the power of peace, I'm being peaceful in a peaceless environment. And I'm actually also creating a peaceful impact. I'm actually transforming the environment. That then I think is power. So we have this capacity for silence, but the power of silence, can I have that capacity in a chaotic situation, maintain my own silence, and actually also bring others into that state of silence? And that's a power.
I feel like perhaps we should have asked this question in the very beginning. What is the power of silence? Like what do I need to do to create it? For those who are probably wondering about that.
So we use three terms interchangeably. We could say the power of silence, or we could say the power of purity, or we could say the power of spirituality. They pretty much, sometimes we even say the power of yoga, pretty much the same thing. And what we're talking about in terms of methodology is that I learn about myself that I am a soul an eternal being, and I come here and play a part through in the physical realm. So silence itself is being deeply immersed in the experience of what is eternal. So it's no longer, so it's very different from physical. And this is why we say it's very portable. I can be anywhere. And now that I know, okay, I'm having thoughts and experiences about what is eternal. So that's what generates silence. We say that truth resides in silence. So I want to almost accumulate those experiences within the self, spirituality. So this is the accumulation of the power of silence. Consider the power of yoga as well, because silence is the language of God. In the sense, I need to be in that eternal state in order to connect to that being in a really powerful way. So accumulating those experiences, really having them imprint on the self, I'm accumulating the power of silence so that that stage, that state, that vibration is becoming more and more my natural state, if you will, my go-to. And so when I'm in different situations, no matter what's going on, I'm more likely to be able to stabilize in that state. And it's such a high level frequency, it actually can color lower level frequencies. So the power of silence, deeply immersed in what is, we could say, real or eternal, and continuing to deepen that experience in the self until it becomes more and more natural.
So basically, when you're talking about that I would be able to meaningfully experience that I'm a soul and meaningfully not just think it, but meaningfully feel I'm not identifying with the situations around me, regardless of what's happening, that it has to actually feel like my reality. So there isn't that noise of the waste upheaval, that would be what silence is.
It was really lovely. I know this class was referred to recently of two of our daddies who have since transitioned, if you will, Daddy Gulzar, Daddy Janki, and listening to Daddy Gulzar share about her training in spirituality at a young age, 8 or 9 years old. So simple. We should be so lucky that our experiences of spirituality or silence should be that simple. Just going into that incorporeal form. I am an incorporeal being. I am a soul. That's it. Just so deeply. And there's less and less waste inside. So they describe the way that she described is, yeah, didn't matter what anyone else was doing. I was not influenced. That's called power. I was not influenced. That idea of I am an incorporeal being, they went there. They didn't think about it or analyze it or interpret it. They just went there and kept accumulating those experiences. And the more they went into that reality, what is eternal, the less and less they were influenced by what is temporal. And so that's really power, the power of silence. And they could do that anywhere, anytime. They were just in reality. So this is, it's such great power. And I loved how they talked about, yes, that was our original training. So they have the power to not be influenced, to maintain the integrity. And then only later, what was different in later years, what was that is now the service to others, to uplift others so they can have that experience. That's power as well. So I used to have the feeling when I came into the company of Daddy Gulzar, even if it was a few seconds, I got an entire course on the power of silence without her saying a word, literally vibrating this stage of such sweet royal silence. You could feel the souls in such an enjoyable place, and everything else was wiped from the mind. That's power, to be able to do that for another soul.
Maybe it was lovely just to end on that, and because silence is very delicious when you're actually aligned properly. And so we always encourage souls to come to the drop-in on-site or online sessions, really to experience that for themselves. So we'll have a little reflection.
Perhaps the first layer of moving into silence is to become quiet. Not just physically quiet, but a quieting of the physical senses. They're so used to looking, hearing, speaking outside. So even though the eyes and ears are open, my attention is now more pulled inwards. I have greater interest in my inner world. So the senses become quiet. And in my inner world, I remember the point of it all, the self, the mind holding just a single thought. I am a soul, an eternal being. All of these layers and labels have accumulated on me, but they're not really me. And I let them melt away until just I, the point, remain. And there is a sense of peace that comes, flows through the mind, floods the entire inner world. A deep sense of calm, remembering the self. And that calm helps me to let go of anything that's making me heavy or tense or afraid, such that I'm able to enter, to go beyond, and arrive at a very silent space where the only sound is of the eternal. I exist. I am a traveler through time. Everything I've been seeking outside actually resides within me. Letting go and experiencing the wonder of the self. I, the soul. Sweet silence. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining with us this evening. So one reminder, we do have the online drop-in sessions Thursdays, Fridays, and Sunday evenings, 6:30 to 7:30 Calgary time. Those are online on the BK Calgary YouTube channel. We also have that on site as well at the Northeast Center, now called Inner Peace Center. Same time, 6:30 to 7:30 on that Friday as well. We have on-site sessions as well at the Academy on Saturdays. Those are reflective and meditation sessions, on-site sessions as well, reflective and meditative on Mondays. There's lots and lots going on. So please visit the website. You can also check out Eventbrite and just make sure you put in Burma Kumari's Calgary. All of that is available for you to look at the details. So thank you for joining. If you have any topics that you would like for us to explore, feel free to email the center. Om Shanti.